If you've ever experienced spiritual warfare, Transfigured by Patricia Sandoval is definitely a book that I would recommend to you. This book was sent to me by a patron, by Scott Herbin, and I put off reading it because I like to judge books by their cover, and the cover of this book, it just looks kind of cheesy and maybe inexpensive or cheap, and the contents are nothing of the sort. Patricia's testimony in this book on so many different aspects of suffering, from abortion to drug usage to being homeless to working at Planned Parenthood, all of these different aspects she's able to draw together and really actually separate and show how God has worked directly through those things. One of the things I think that stands out to me most in this book is the fact that Patricia's bloodline comes into play. She shares how her grandfather was martyred, and her great-grandfather, and he and his brothers, 6 brothers, were all killed, and how that bloodline ultimately affected her. And God has plans for each of our lives. Like, we are ordained, in a sense, in a particular way. And she shares all of the different ways that God has spoken to her through dreams, through personal prophecies that others have shared with her, saying, God laid this on my heart to share with you. All of these different aspects that she's drawn together and been able to put into a formulated chapter by chapter section or subset, however you want to phrase that. So every month, right, I do a poll over on Patreon, and my patrons who are Kid Gators or higher, which is a membership of $6 a month or more, get to vote on what book I'm going to review for this month. I do a book review on the last Thursday of every month, and this month I chose 3 autobiographies to choose from because I have been aspiring to write my own autobiography, own story of my testimony. And I have just been struggling with, how do I start? How do I want this to be laid out? And one of the things that really kind of stood out to me in Patricia's book here is the fact that anytime she referenced a dream, it was italicized. Anytime that she basically took her testimony and her trauma and then was able to educate different aspects of church teaching or different aspects that the church offers in a way that was not only personal to her own testimony, but also educational. So she talks about Divine Mercy Sunday and how, like, the graces that are instilled within that. She talks about different apparitions that have occurred around the world and just how she was never aware of them, but now that she is, there's X, Y, and Z. She talks about, Saint Philomena and different saints and shares a bit of their story and how it directly impacted her. She talks about the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Growing up, I converted to Catholicism at 21, so I did not grow up in a house that had icons and crucifixes and pictures of the Sacred Heart or the Pierced Heart of Mary, any of these things. And so to see how much from her childhood, from being 3 years old, having the Sacred Heart in her parents' bedroom, how much that impacted her long term really was inspiring to me as a parent to say, my oldest daughter is almost 2, and how much would that impact her to see an image of the Sacred Heart? We have a statue of the Holy Family, but that's about it as far as, there are a couple crucifixes here or there, but it's not like that traditional Catholic home that you might walk into. I know, it's just not, because that's not how I grew up. And I think a lot of our childhood ends up bleeding into how we choose to parent. And so I really appreciated those aspects of this book. But I think that the piece that stuck with me most is probably that Patricia pursued daily Mass. And she had to walk to Mass for such a long time. She was homeless for 3 years, and during that homeless time she was using drugs. But she left so much to Providence after she committed her life to the Lord. And my church, daily Mass, is a 5-minute walk from me. And it would be so simple to... And it would definitely take effort, don't get me wrong. I would have to get out of bed. I'd have to get the girls ready. I would have to walk to this church or drive, because it is driving distance too. But that daily Mass aspect and how much receiving the Eucharist regularly can affect us. Again, I wasn't raised Catholic. I never went to daily Mass. Church on Sunday was required for some time because my mother was a worship leader, but outside of that, my family was kind of split on what church we should ultimately go to. So that whole consistency and the moral obligation to the Mass wasn't instilled in me as a child just because we weren't Catholic. And so now, seeing Patricia's testimony, kind of seeing how she was raised, what she's doing now, it really just gave me kind of a newfound hope to how God works in our lives. God, like I said, God has ordained us all with a specific calling. And unless we fully submit ourselves to Him in that, it cannot be fulfilled. And so Patricia, she shares so many different situations where she could have said no out of discomfort, out of, feeling like she couldn't, out of all of these different excuses that she could have come up with. And she ends up saying yes. And she shows how that yes blossoms into affecting others, into changing others' lives, into bringing others the hope of redemption or redemption itself, or seeking the Lord more fully, or not choosing to commit this mortal sin that they've been considering. There are all of those aspects that we don't always see behind the scenes when we're planting the seeds, when we're just, saying yes one interaction at a time and choosing to say yes, choosing to choose God. And so for me, I really appreciate that Scott sent me this book, gave me the opportunity to read it this month because it was chosen. Because I've been feeling lately that I wish that what I offer was enough, through YouTube, through my interactions. I don't get asked to speak as much as maybe I would like, or I don't get asked to do X, Y, or Z as much as maybe I think that I should or could, given my testimony that I do have. And I ultimately don't think that I'm surrendering it fully to the Lord. I don't think that I'm I'm not pursuing daily Mass. I'm not doing these things that ultimately cultivate the fullness of who God is within our understanding of Him within the Catholic Church. So it's really just it was a really good experience to read it, and I feel very, as I said, encouraged to get some more decals or whatever, photos on the wall of the Sacred Heart, or focus more on that the fullness of the Catholic Church, the tradition that we have, and integrate that into our lives so that we might be able to have that, and that our children would experience that growing up, and just kind of, step into that and start saying yes on a lot of different levels. So again, Transfigured by Patricia Sandoval was the book that I read. I shared yesterday that I wasn't able to start it till Monday, but by the grace of God, I finished it. And little spoiler alert, skip maybe the next 20 seconds or so if you're planning to read it. The one thing I didn't like was that the man in the blue suit never showed up in the end. I was waiting for this grand love story. She talked about him 20 times, and how all these people were prophesying about him. And then I felt like the book ended abruptly because it never came back up. It wasn't that she met this man in the blue suit, And maybe that's because that's what I'd be used to in fiction. But I was really anticipating that prophecy was going to be fulfilled in this book, because so many other prophecies were fulfilled in what she talked about, in the different aspects of her dreams and everything else. It's just amazing how much God and the Holy Spirit has been working through her life, and just all that testimony that she shared. So I pray that if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below so that you could purchase it if you're interested in reading it for yourself. It's definitely a powerful book. Like I said, the spiritual warfare that she experienced in it was very real. I personally have experienced similar, pressure at night, demons being around back in the days when I was using drugs and drinking exorbitant amounts of alcohol. I've definitely experienced a lot of what she talked about in this book. And so I think that yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have read it. I'm thankful that she shared the story because it does feel inspiring to me and like just a reminder of the different things that I have been through those tumultuous times in my life. And I just pray that God guides me to my computer so that I can get them down on paper, because it really is, I feel, something that He has called me toward to share. And I just really appreciate that I had the opportunity to read this book. So thanks for letting me share this review with you. I just pray that God guides you to what He'd like you to say yes to, and that you have the courage to say yes as well, just as Patricia did. So I pray that He grants you the resources that you need to draw closer to Him, and in turn with those around you. And I pray that you're able to make it a great day. I'll see you in the comments, and patrons, I'll see you on Sunday for current events.